Shaun, what is the secret to the comedy business?
Well, if you're looking at the business side, I can't tell you, because if I let the secret go, then everybody will be in the business.
Good
I'll be
point.
out of business.
That's right. Like the technicians used to say, if you write down the diagram of the scheme, they won't need you anymore if you write
Right.
down the schematic for the engineering. So we cannot tell you cannot tell me that, you would have to shoot me.
I would tell you, actually, I think one of the secrets is to work on your weaknesses, not your strengths. So
Meaning?
if you're a good writer, stop spending your time writing, spend your time performing more. If you're a good performer, but your material is weak, spend more time writing.
So is part of your business coaching comedians now?
People have asked me to, and I say that's not my strength. I don't want to teach. But I say comedy is 1/3 writing, 1/3 performing, and 1/3 marketing. And you have to be good at two of them.
Now, you are a former stand-up comic, or once a former?
Still. That's what I do.
Right. But you also have a business in the comedy industry that you run.
Yes.
What does the business do?
It's the Ivy League of Comedy, and I put together shows, usually with me in them, for theaters, performing arts centers, corporate events, charity events, houses of worship, country clubs, mostly theaters.
You first drew my attention by a slogan that said something like the Ivy League of Comedy, clean comedy.
Yes.
And I thought, what a great thing, because now, you cannot turn on a, quote, comedy show in the car with kids in the car, because you don't know what they may hear. I mean, am I the only one who wants that niche? How's that niche? You don't hear much about it.
Well, obviously you're not the only one, because I can still pay my mortgage.
Okay, good.
But it started, I was working on Wall Street, and when you start as a comedian, unlike a musician, if you're a musician, you start when you're a kid, and by the time you're an adult, you're good. In comedy, people don't really start performing till they're adults. So every comedian's going to stink for 5 or 10 years before they get good. So you start out as an amateur and you work in amateur shows. And my colleagues in finance would come to see me and they'd say, your comedy is clean, but everybody else in the show is filthy. We want to take other people as a business trip to a show. Where can we see an all clean show? And there wasn't one. And I said, well, there's obviously demand for this. So I started arranging them.
Wow. How long ago was that?
That was in 2004.
Where's your business come from? What is your main business? Booking?
My main business is putting shows together. Putting shows together for theaters.
And not conventions, mainly for theaters, one-night stands?
Usually it's one night. Or, I mean, for a given theater, it's one night. For comics, I may arrange a tour that's 2, 3, 4 nights in different places.
And do people find you? Do you advertise? How do you find the bookings?
It's both. People find me. I did put some effort into search engine optimization. So people find me. I also send emails. I make phone calls. It started with a lot of cold calling.
Do you buy Google AdWords?
I tried that and Facebook advertising a little bit, but it didn't seem that productive.
So you just do search advertising, SEO, search engine optimization?
Optimization, but not advertising. I have a website and I want to make sure the right keywords are in it,
right,
so theaters can find me.
Do you do your own website, or do you have someone do it for you?
I was stupid enough to do it myself.
Wow. And you figured it out, how to get this keyword optimization.
It took some work. I mean, there's so much information on everything in the internet, so you can research and find these things.
What beyond clean is it that clients, theaters are looking for?
Their main concern is filling seats.
Right.
And a lot of, as I said, you start as an amateur and you're no good. Theaters get calls all the time from people who say, I want to do a show for you, I'll fill seats. And I give you an example. The former booker or executive director for a local theater told me she never answers her phone unless she recognizes the number in the caller ID because, and I'll do the best I can at quoting her, every sitar player in the country is calling her, telling her why she should book him. And she said, I wish I could, but nobody's going to show up to hear a sitar player.
Why are most comics bad at it for so many years?
It's like anything.
Right.
You would be bad at golf for a few years too, but you only, stage time is like location in real estate. You get better by getting up in front of an audience, but it's hard to find an audience to get up in front of when you're new. So you go to an open mic night and you're in front of other comedians who aren't really paying attention. It takes a long time to get the practice to get good. On the drive here, I saw another driver throw a bag of garbage out of the window of his Toyota Prius.
It's not just a matter, I guess, obviously, as I think about it, of the wise guy, funny guy from high school coming out and going on stage. No.
That guy doesn't, I mean, it's two different skills. Not that one is harder, better, or more important than the other, but making your friends laugh where you have a common frame of reference, and making strangers laugh when you're on a stage with bright lights in your face and they're expecting you to make them laugh. They're two different skills. That funny guy in high school, he got all the attention he needed in high school. He's done. It's the quiet guy in the back of the room that became the stand-up comedian.
And what does that quiet guy or woman who's coming up now have in common? Because you know so many of them. What is their unifying trait?
A distorted sense of how things work. Sort of like if you look at a Picasso painting. Picasso decided he's looking at a face from the side. Maybe the nose isn't here. Maybe the nose is over here. Because if you look at somebody from the side, that's sort of the perception. And he invented Cubism. And comedy is sort of the same thing with words. And I can give you a silly example. I heard recently that father-daughter dances are becoming more popular. And my thought was father-daughter dances, or as Woody Allen calls them, dances. Because when you hear the phrase father-daughter dance, you may think of your daughter, your sister, something like that. When I hear father-daughter, the first thing that pops into my head is Woody Allen. And that's sort of the warped way of looking at things that makes a comedian.
Well, see, it's funny you mention that, because I see here now, a good comedian seems to take a sudden left or right turn from where you think you're going. Shaun has specialty theme shows on relationships called Battle of the Relationships, not the Sexes. So I said, oh, that's it. Oh, I've always heard Battle of Sexes, but tell me about the Battle of the Relationships. That's different.
Well, I had one called Battle of the Sexes, where it's a single man, a single woman, a married man, and a married woman, all talking a little bit about relationships, because almost every comedian has material about relationships. So it's really a hook to get people to say, that's interesting, let's go to a show. But that's for comedians, so that's an expensive show. I was talking to a theater who said I need a 3-comedian version of it. I can't afford 4 comedians. And I thought, and I said, okay, how about a single comic, a married comic, and what I refer to as a post-married comic? So it could be either a widow or somebody divorced.
See, but now there's a skit about the comedian who's booking shows, but I can't afford 4 comedians. I mean, you're playing the 2 roles, right?
Right.
You're the comedian, but you're also the business owner. I can't bring you 3 people.
Well, I'm usually one of the comics. I also do.
I'm not going to cut myself.
Right. Well, there are times I have to. I just booked, and I do this frequently, and these shows sell out, and I don't know why more people don't do them. I booked a show that's all female comedians, and those shows sell really well. And that started by accident. I was talking to 2 comics, female comics who were best friends and roommates, and I said, it must be great because you're best friends and you live together and you get to travel together. And they looked at me like I was an idiot and said, nobody ever puts 2 women in the same show. I'm like, I can do that.
Comedians are business people.
The good ones are.
You have another one. Business school in 1 hour.
Right. Business school in about an hour.
That's about what it takes, right?
Yeah. Well, I noticed a lot of my material could be a business lesson. So I said, hey, why don't I put a show together? So I have a show called Business School in about an hour. And now I had a problem. It was running more than an hour. It was 70 or 75 minutes. And I was complaining to my brother, I don't know what to do. I've got to cut something. And he said, why don't you just call it Business School in about an hour, now with 20% more hour?
What's a good joke that gets a good response in the business school in an hour? What would one of those be?
It's really more stories than jokes. So I'd run this interview way long to think about that.
Okay.
But I actually can give you a quick example.
Right.
I was, when I was starting out in comedy, I was at a networking event, and it was the Princeton Club, so it was a snooty networking event. And they asked everybody to explain what their job was. And I said, my job speaks for itself. I'm a stand-up comedian. Very simple, right? Some jobs you can describe easily. You can say, I'm a dentist, I'm a stand-up comedian. These are jobs that you don't need to explain. But they said, we need to know what your function is in society and how it works. They wanted a more descriptive answer. And so I said, okay, it's my job to make you forget how much you hate your job.
Was there much humor on Wall Street? Could you find anything there?
You know, when you work in Wall Street and you tell people you're a comedian, it was like, oh, you should talk about this place. There's so much that's funny here.
Right.
Like, no, it's like talking to your friends. It's stuff that's funny in the moment, not stories you can tell later.
Right. So the business of comedy is never going to die, right? No, if we go back thousands of years, they probably were telling jokes about whatever the issues were then, right?
I guess. I haven't looked at cave paintings and laughed, so I guess it's topical.
Well, I'll say you're going to be in business for another 1,000 years, Shaun.
I hope so.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Good line. You
Thanks.
won up the anchor at the end. There you go.